Let's turn the sad faces upside down and kick things off. So, Jennie, it is 8:01. Over to you.
Here we go. Let's have that technology moment. We'll give it a second. There we are. So welcome. Good morning, everybody. And especially if you are joining us for the first time, and even if you're coming back, we welcome you back into our room all the time. We always begin Friday with a small and important contribution, and that is one of acknowledgement. And today I'm actually picking on something. Campaign day was yesterday for the Moose Hide campaign, which is a grassroots movement of Indigenous and non-Indigenous men and boys who are standing up against violence for women and children. You can see the link bottom left of your screen there. And from there, if you wanted to, at any time in the year, we always have these campaign days, and that's not it. It's not done. This is a year-round conversation. Pins are free from the Moose Hide campaign. If you can see the photograph on the right-hand side, our team were wearing them yesterday at SAIT. And the idea is, that if one pin sparks 5 conversations about commitment and honor, to honor and respect and protect the women in your life and speak out against gender-based and domestic violence, will be 5 conversations better off. So although it was yesterday, well worth marking your calendar for this time next year. It's easy to join. It's a healthy way for organizations to take action towards the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. So for us today, Craig, Ela, and myself are based in Calgary, and for SAIT, we like to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Those are the Indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennie. As always, so very well done. Folks, we are very excited to have Ela Egger joining us this morning. Ela is one of our trusted facilitators here at SAIT. She's the co-host of the Trust on Purpose podcast, and she's also the founder and principal of Big Change Inc. It's a consulting organization that supports leaders in becoming who they want to be and for teams and thriving together. And I can't think of a better person to get into this conversation around trust and why it is so important. And maybe we're just going to start right there. Ela, I'm going to kind of put this big topic out there. She's excited. This big topic that organizations spend a lot of time talking about, thinking about, working on. But why is it so important? And where do organizations get it right and or wrong? And that might just take us right through the next 40 minutes.
I was going to say, we're done.
How long do we have? There
you go.
Yeah. Great question. And great way to kick off the conversation. The immediate question that popped into my mind, and I know we can't see our audience, but I'd love to see comments or emojis in the chat, is how many of you have worked for a leader or part of a team where you felt low trust or distrust? I'm raising my hand. I've absolutely had that. Yeah, absolutely. We've all had that experience. And what is it like to have to work with teams that have low trust? It's tricky. We look for ways to work around. There's the conversation after the conversation. We lose efficiency. We lose the ability to put ideas on the table. And I'm secretly saying here, I don't like the word conflict. So you'll hear me refer to crunchy spicy instead, right? So we lose the ability to put crunchy spicy on the table, and it just feels ick. There's lost energy, there's a motivation, and we lose the ability to tap into discretionary effort, right? We're just doing the bare minimum because we have to, not because we want to give any more. What's it like to flip the other way? So tell me about, I'd love to see in the chat, what's it like to work for a team that has higher trust or strong trust? What are some of the things that show up? Safe, motivated. Yeah, okay, look at this. This is great. Honesty, sense of pride, joy. And so I guess my question, and Jenny and Craig, I'd love to hear your input here. How do you know when there's trust in a team? What do you see?
You asking us or the chat?
Yeah, both of you. Yeah, sorry, Jenny and Craig.
I think we can see some of it in the chat though. Like, let's pick up on, you can see the one that just floated past me, goes so fast, is Erin's comment there. I can trust others to do their jobs, allowing me to focus on mine. And so rather than running around checking on everybody, on everything, and actually there's no productivity within that, which is where a lot of the frustration comes, because you're not putting in your own value and your own contribution. Whereas when the trust is there, not only do you get to celebrate and recognize other people's value and contribution, but you get to put that in yourself. And that's a day where we feel like we've done a good job.
Yeah.
Great.
When you've got a good trusting team that can, that it's just firing in all cylinders, right? You know, somebody's got your back. You know that Jimmy's going to get it done. You know that Susie's going to pick up that piece. It's just a great spot to be in, right? You get into this flow state as a group, which, you know, kind of doesn't happen all that often, but when it does, it's kind of magical to watch.
Right. And so you just said something really important. It doesn't happen all that often. Yay. See, I just reached in your brain and I pulled that nugget out. And this is a question I ask leaders, teams that I work with. I've asked this question thousands of times. How many of you ever had someone sit down and say, so there's this thing called trust, and here's how it works?
Nope.
No. Never. Yeah. I would say, again, in the thousands of people I've asked, I've had maybe 10 people say, yeah, someone taught me down or sat me down and taught me what trust was. And so if nobody's teaching us what trust is, how to navigate it, how to build it, how to restore it, then how are we learning about it? Well, we're bumping into life and figuring it out ourselves. So then it makes sense as we come together in teams and organizations, each with a different perspective, or I'll say a different relationship or understanding of trust. Of course, we're going to do this because we're different people with different perspectives and different experiences.
So why do you think then, Ela, I'm curious, as you do a lot of work in this area, why do you think organizations don't have this intentional conversation? Right? Why do we treat it as something that, well, it just happens or it doesn't happen?
I think my humble opinion is that A, they don't know how, and B, they don't know where to start. Right? Think trust is this hugely elusive word. It's so important, and yet people really don't know, like, how do I do this thing? And there's some complexity here because trust is an emotion. So the emotion of trust is that which allows us to coordinate action with other people. Trust is also often a personal value. So now we've got a double header, trust the emotion, plus it's a value driving my behavior. And not to say that trust isn't everyone's values, but it might not be a personal value that drives behavior. We also then have risk or trust the risk assessment tool, which is where the practicality and the navigating of trust really shows up. But again, I don't know, we weren't taught growing up. Anybody taught that in school? Nope.
And many people aren't even taught it in their homes either. Like, it's just,
that's right.
It's something, so much of this comes from, I think the expression I've heard you use, Ela, is first messages as well. And we carry, trust is one that we really, really carry that forever. And we're all, again, as you just said, we're all different in all spaces. So without the language, without the knowledge, and to your point earlier, it is a very crunchy conversation because I have no control, no idea where it's going. And at the end of the day, we might feel really awkward. And those are three things that nobody really wakes up and says, I'm going to put this on my plate for discussion today because I want to feel like that. So it's tough to get into there.
Those aren't
That's right.
those aren't your mantra words in your meditation. Awkward and uncomfortable.
No, not regularly.
No, some days, sure.
Yeah. Aaron has a really good comment here in the chat. It's pretty simple, right? And it speaks to what we're talking about, is that most of us just simply learn trust through bad and good experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a question that we have here from Alexandria, and I think it's a good place to build off of, is, first of all, what is trust? How do you build it? How do you navigate it? How do you restore it? So maybe we should define it to start with.
There's our agenda.
Yeah. So the framework that I use and the definition that I use is based on Charles Feltman's Thin Book of Trust. And trust is choosing to make something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. So trust is choosing to make something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. And as important to define here is distrust. So distrust is choosing not to make something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. Distrust isn't bad. You can trust me as a coach, as a facilitator. I can walk and chew gum at the same time. You should not trust me to fly a plane, cut your hair, pull your tooth, cook a rack of lamb. I don't even, like, there's so many things I don't know how to do. So why would you trust me? So we see that trust isn't either an on or off switch. It's rather, where does it make sense for me to trust? How do I assess that it's a safe place or that this is the right move to make? And equally is like, actually, Ela, I don't trust you to fly a plane, although you might be very enthusiastic.
Jenny, what are your thoughts here?
I'm still smiling at Ela flying the plane. So it's always a yes and, isn't it? And I think the key part in there for workplace, like this trust conversation expands everywhere that we go and everything that we do. But that word vulnerable, and it's what I feel is vulnerable, and sometimes a bit of a almost a raised eyebrow, but it makes sense all of a sudden, is it can be your name, it can be your work ethic, it can be, even for some leaders, it can be your results that you hold as valuable. And therefore, we can take this, or we don't, it goes into the smallest things. And when we start to look at delegation, and when we start to look at just our relationships at work, we have to understand ourselves a lot as to what is it that we value. And I'm sure in there, this might be a rabbit hole for later if we still have time, but trusting yourself has to be one of the first parts before we look at our relationships with others too. I always say, come this way before you go that way. So to me, there's an interesting piece in there too.
Yeah. And I think that self-reflection, which I know you and I are both a big fan of John Amici, The Promise of Giants, right? Knowing yourself, knowing where you are. And it's really easy for us, if you and we are in relationship, Jenny, and I do trust you. If we're in relationship and I feel that there's mistrust, I'm very likely going to look to you first, that there's something you're doing, but actually this is a two-way dance. We co-create this, and it's equally as important for me to say, Jenny, how am I contributing to where we are in our relationship? I want to own and be accountable for my behaviors. And so if there's something that I need to shift or tweak, I'd love to have a conversation about that, because I care about you and I care about our relationship. But we don't do that.
And I don't think we do the step before either. One of the things I've really appreciated about yours and Charles's work is that self-reflection before even that conversation. And so to actually take a look at, what part am I playing in this? So if I'm deciding where's that trust falling down, rather than looking to you, okay, so we hear this a lot, they just have to earn my trust. Well, actually, the part in there that was magic is, what am I doing that's in that trust relationship? And so as much as I'm looking to you, you're looking to me. What part am I playing within there? And I think, Mary, excuse me, maybe that if we can, it would be a really good time for you just to break down what trust is, because that makes
Mm.
that conversation so much easier. It takes away the big scary part of it and gives us an easier walk through, and we want to talk to somebody about that.
Mm-hmm. So the quick speed version.
Yeah.
So Charles's model is based on 4 domains of trust. And the first one I'll say is competency. So do you have the skills, ability, knowledge, experience, resources to do the task you've been given or the task you've accepted? So as I said earlier, you can absolutely trust me as a coach, as a facilitator, a lot of things you can trust me to do because I have experience, credential, knowledge, resources. Shouldn't trust me to fly a plane, cut your hair, or pull your tooth. The next one over is sincerity. And this one's really important. We feel sincerity. So that is a felt sense. And it's important to pay attention to that felt sense. It's not woohoo. It's attached to our vagus nerve, where 300 times more information comes from our gut to our brain. Sincerity is, does your external language match your internal dialogue? And I'll give an example of the opposite of sincerity, where what you say out loud, you're already looking for an exit strategy. And we've all done it. I call that a criminal or a dirty yes, right? I'm saying yes to you out loud, but hell, I'm looking for an exit strategy. How did I get myself into this? I don't want to do this. Well, of course, the other person will sense that. They may not be able to say exactly what it is, but they know there's something. This is especially important in a workplace where the only option for any ask is yes.
Mm-hmm.
You are absolutely getting criminal or dirty yeses because people feel they don't have any other choice.
Yeah.
So being able to say yes, no, commit to commit, or negotiate is really important in upholding that domain of sincerity. Reliability is how you keep your promises is just as important as how you break them. So had I texted you 5 minutes to 8 this morning to say, gosh, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. Pissed off, frustrated, angry, disappointed, again, all very normal human emotions. But what if I had let you know 2 weeks ago, I'm really sorry, I've got a scheduling bump, I'm going to need to renegotiate. So still maybe frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, again, very normal emotions. But we have time and space to find plan B, C, D. The closer to the deadline, the bigger the trust breakdown. Mm-hmm. And care is the last one, but it's the most important. So when I sense that there's care, either from me as a person or a shared care to the outcome, the goal, the project we're working on, I'll extend trust much more generously in all of those areas because I know you've got my back, we're committed to this, we're both focused on it. If I don't feel care, I'm going to shrink trust in every other area and give you transactional or situational trust because I have to. So that's the quick and dirty of the 4 domains.
Very
so
cool.
when we bump into something where we feel there might be a tricky, it's really helpful for that self-reflection to go, so where might that breakdown be happening? Is it a care? Is it a reliability issue? Is it a sincerity issue? Is it a competency issue? And that self-reflection first about why and how am I assessing this trust or distrust?
Mm-hmm.
Is so important because then we can have a conversation about it.
Yeah, that's good. So competency, sincerity, reliability, and care. How do you go about having that conversation then? Let's get tactical and practical a little bit for anybody here who might, be concerned about some one-on-one relationship they have at work, or we have leaders that have joined us this morning. How do you start that conversation with your team? If you're a leader who thinks their team doesn't trust them,
easiest way, throw me under the bus, say I was on a webinar with Jennie and Craig and Ela this morning and I learned something about trust. I'd really love to have a conversation about this. Would you be willing? And that's it. That's how you start. And it's okay that you don't understand all the intricacies or how all of the domains work or all of that, but extending that vulnerability to say, I've learned something about trust this morning that I didn't know before. And I'd really like to start by just having a conversation about what does trust look like on our team? How are we navigating this? And how do we want to design it going forward? How do we build stronger trust? Not saying that we have low trust, but how do we build stronger trust? What does that look like?
So what do you need, an hour for this conversation and you got it taken care of? Or
One and done.
I'm being a little glib because it's and I certainly don't think anybody listening would make that assumption. But if you're coming from a spot where maybe you've got concerns about this on your team, odds are your spidey senses are probably right. Yeah. If you're feeling it, there's probably something there. So can a leader themselves have this conversation with their team? Do you need, like, I was trying to work through, because, tied into this obviously is psychological safety. And if trust isn't there, psychological safety likely isn't there. So how do you kind of start this? Yeah, I appreciate what you said and trying to lean to, I went to a conference and I heard this, or I was on a webinar and I heard this, but how do you dig into it a little bit more? Maybe the two of you can kind of walk through that a bit, because I think there's a lot here, but it's not, conversation is a great starting place, but I'm not sure it's that quote unquote simple to keep it going and building.
Yeah, great. Jenny, do you want to chime in?
No, I want you to talk the whole time because I'm fascinated. Okay, I'll start and then you can take the meat of it. Okay. Because I the piece that's missing, like, on a couple of those domains, it was really, really clear you feel it and you sense it. And we do have a lot of people who have worked very hard for many, many years to not, I was going to say not show how they feel, but actually not to pay attention to how they feel. And so, Craig, to your point, how do you start this? If you don't know your people, that's got to be your starting point. The whole, we refer to it all the time as building social capital, or, working on your relationship. Have you actually stopped to recognize who's in the room, what they're bringing to the room, what's going on for them? There's your starting point to start with. And then, how do you bring up that conversation? I think something important that you said before, Ela, and maybe this is where we start with, is that risk meter. We're weighing that all the time. What's the risk? And sometimes it's holding that vulnerability. I remember you and I sat on the other side of a trust course at one point, and I think it was Charles actually talking about reliability. I'm like, oh, that's me. Yep. Every time. I promise you'll have it by Friday, and I'm not even beginning to think of Friday. You're going to have it next Wednesday. And just the aha moment of, oh, that's what that might be doing, even though I know I'll get it done. I'm just over promising. So I think know your people, and again, look back to yourself too. Now I'll give it to you.
This sits on my desk every day. And for those of you that have been in person with me facilitating, every single participant receives a heart, because one of the most important things, again, is that domain of care. And remembering, before any title, any credential, any role, anything, we're human first. We're human first. And it's funny, I actually ask in facilitation and work that I do, okay, just checking, everybody 100% human? There's a giggle, but it's the realization that, you know what? We all get up in the morning and put our feet on the ground, and we want to do a good job. We want to be good people. We want to do good work. Okay, I'm saying this with a tiny, like, maybe a couple people wake up and put their feet on the ground and they're like, how can I mess with somebody today? I do have rose-colored glasses, but I think maybe one person on the planet, maybe one. But having these conversations and bringing in actually James Clear a little bit. So what's 1% more? I don't have to suddenly like open up a huge trust conversation that feels overwhelming and too vulnerable. But what would 1% more trust look like on this team? What would 1% more trust look like? Or care being the most important one, How do I show care to you? What does that look like? Here's how you would show care to me. And it's so incredibly fascinating. I was working with a team, and a not-for-profit, the executive director would spend an hour every morning walking to everybody's office to check in and say hello and ask about weekend and all of those things. One of her team, this made her vibrate on the inside. A high D, I'm here to get my work done. I don't have time for this chitty chat, like get on. And so guess what? That caused a disconnect, a crunchy spicy for them, because how the ED was displaying care was not how her staff member needed care to be shown. Great, let's have a conversation about that. Rather than twitch on the inside every time I walk through the office, tell me what you need. And if it's not me checking in on you, okay, that's all right. How can I do that?
Yep.
I also really like to point to data, especially in terms of reliability, because I'm never going to say to you, you're not reliable. I'm never going to say that. My behaviors will show you, because I'm going to work around you, avoid you. But what about questions like, I noticed the last 3 weeks, that report that's due at noon has been late. Are you okay?
Mm.
How can I help you? What's going on? So you
Yep.
can't dispute the data, right? The report has been late 3 weeks in a row, but rather from coming like, you need to get that report on time. Hey, how are you? What's getting in the way? How do we need to fix this together? I'm here. I've got your back.
Which I think stems to, well, that in itself stems back to care. And hopefully the piece that stands out here too is these aren't difficult conversations or crunchy or spicy conversations. These are just genuine people, human first conversations. There you go. And really is, Craig, I think to your earlier point, this is the beginning. It is that awareness and paying attention. That's where this conversation starts from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think if you are a leader who has struggled with this,
Mm-hmm.
it's, you do have to be vulnerable enough, I think, to talk to your team and say, listen, I'm trying to make an improvement here versus just, perhaps jumping in and trying to show you care all of a sudden, right? You might want to preface it and set the stage for why this sudden perceived change of behavior is happening. And I think sometimes just taking that simple step, Ela, it's the same as what you were talking about. I was on this webinar this morning and I heard this is a neat idea to me. I'd like to try it, right? But setting that stage, I think that is often where perhaps individuals, whatever it is, folks go wrong and they just start trying the new thing without perhaps explaining why. And they're just not vulnerable enough to do that.
Great addition. And that to me comes into the domain of reliability and care, is that I'm transparent about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There's no hidden agenda. Like, I'm not suddenly more woke than anybody else, right? No, I am genuinely wanting to show up as a better human and as a better leader. And here's one way that I want to test drive that. And modeling behaviors and talking about things that we're working on as leaders lets them know, guess what? We're also human. None of us have it all figured out. We're not supposed to. So taking accountability and being transparent, these are the things that I'm working on as a leader. What are you working on and how can I support you? How can I support you? How can we do that together?
We've got a couple questions that have popped up in the chat that I think we've touched on some of this in terms of what we've been going through so far. But how can leaders cultivate and maintain trust within their organizations? And I think here's the and part, particularly in times of crisis and uncertainty. Right?
That's such a good one. Such a good one. I'm going to refer back to a quote that I love. And in this moment, I can't remember who it is, so I can't credit the quote, but dig the well before you're thirsty. In the moment of crisis and chaos is not the time to go, oh, we probably need a new strategy on how to build trust, right? And so it actually starts today. before the crisis and chaos, what are you doing today to model trust and build trust? Now, if you're already in crisis and chaos, I understand that. It starts with your own behaviors and how you're modeling to others. I'm uncertain. I don't have all the information either. When I know and I'm able to tell you, I will let you know what's going on. I'm worried too. I'm not disclosing anything I can't disclose, but I'm normalizing, again, the human experience.
Mhm.
Jenny?
That's a juicy one.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And they're always all so context specific. But I think one of the important things to remember too is when crisis has happened or something major has happened that impacts the organizational trust, I sometimes see from leaders as almost a, well, I didn't do that, I didn't create that. And yet when we feel that impact, the leader is our first point of touch. So I loved what you just said there, like it is normalizing. I'm struggling with this too. I don't understand this, or whatever that might be, to the extent that you can have that conversation and remembering that we have all these little individual strands of personal trust as well. And we carry that organizational trust. And so when something major happens, that's still a conversation that we can own and be a part of. And again, really comes back to the care and the empathy. What is going on for each human around the table? Because it will be different.
Yeah.
And that's a timepiece. And Rick has got in the chat here, you can't create this overnight. And we always say this within any culture, it's intentional and it's work and it's consistent. And that's the momentum that that starts to build.
I'm about to start work with a local organization to operationalize trust across their entire organization
Cool.
of 1,300 people. So what are the actual behaviors and how are we going to reinforce those behaviors across the entire organization?
Fantastic.
That's commitment to trust.
Mm-hmm. And the value of that too is when we operationalize and we talk about those behaviors, when we do hit crisis, we already know what they are. We already know where we want to go. We already know what it means to show care to someone in this situation or in that situation. Or, what is reliability? What does even competence mean when we've had 3 major constraints thrown down on us in one day? We've got that. That's a language, both a verbal language and a physical language, the behavior that we can connect to and operate from without really at that point, without even thinking.
Right. And what I love about focusing on behaviors is that it takes away the ickiness. Right? Well, you're not showing me respect. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I think I'm a respectful person. What's leading you to make you feel that I'm not being respectful? What's the behavior? Oh, well, you slam doors when you're walking through the hallways. And like, oh, I think was a wind tunnel. I didn't slam the door on purpose, right? Or yes, I laughed really loud. It was something really fun, whatever it is, but we label behaviors and we lean into the assessment versus what's the behavior. And it's just a behavior. It's when we want either more of or less of. It doesn't really have any meaning until we layer meaning on top. And often our little itty bitty committee looks for ways to make that meaning true for us, but not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So you triggered something for me here if you're talking about operationalizing trust across an organization. I'm picturing the role of director of trust operations, but that's just.
Can we just have a minute that the acronym for that person would be DOT?
No, we got to
That's
figure
true.
out something else.
That's fair. That's fair. But so it kind of speaks to how do you, there was a question earlier in the chat around, how do you do this when you're the newest member to the team, whether it is as an individual contributor or as a leader? But I'm thinking if you're looking to operationalize, you do somewhat to an extent, then start to, and I hate to go down this road, but you're now talking about, onboarding procedures and pieces around here's how we have these conversations. You're actually building these concepts of here's how we talk about trust. But I'm curious if you can expand on this idea. If you're somebody new to the team or a new leader of a team, any nuance in there that we should peel back the layers on?
I think first and foremost, you have to want to. This has to be important to you, right? And so that may be where trust is a value. And so, hell yes, it is important to me. And I want to understand how it works in this new environment. So it may be posing that conversation. This is a value for me. I'd really love to know what it looks like on the team. I want to make sure that I'm living up to expectations and standards and that we're co-designing how we get really good work done. So first and foremost, you have to want to have the conversation. You have to talk about it.
And I think too, like in onboarding, we're so concerned with operation and procedure and all the things that a person needs to know when they're coming in. And we don't remember to talk about experience. What will the experience be? Like here's what you can expect. Mm-hmm. This may be different than when you've worked previously, or, if you're with a client, the experience that we're creating or intending to create is this, and put some language and put some behaviors around that. And that's what we're looking for. And it doesn't always get remembered because we're in such a hurry to get them in and up to speed and running and checking away the boxes. It's the experience that matters.
There's also, every organization has unspoken standards.
Yes.
Right? Unspoken norms. So I remember, working in one organization, if you brought your laptop into a meeting, that was sacrilege. Walk across the street and you don't have your laptop in the meeting, that's sacrilege, right? But you don't know until you bump into the standard or the behavior. And so rather than like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like, I'm so embarrassed, or, oh, hey, I think I just bumped into a standard. I didn't know this. Is this the way it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than all these unspoken things and like pretending that we're supposed to know everything about everything, which we can't. It's like, oh, I think I just bumped into a standard I didn't know about. Can I get some clarity about that? Okay.
And for the person who shares it earlier, what an extension of care to say, in these meetings, this is what we do, like expect this.
Yeah.
Or to catch that early, there's your early extension from in there. That's what we do, is we look out for people before they come. We set them up for success.
Or the accountability to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't tell you that. Let's take care of that. You're right. Yeah. That's a standard here. I'm so sorry. I take accountability that I didn't let you know that. Didn't even cross my mind. Okay, great. You're human too.
Exactly. Time for maybe two more questions that have popped up. The first one, though, has been a common theme that I've seen run through the chat, and specifically in a question is, if trust breaks, how do you repair it?
Such a good question. So the first question is, do you want to repair it? Mm-hmm. Like, are you willing? Are you actually willing? And then we go back to those 4 domains, and where did the breakdown happen? So it might be competence, sincerity, reliability, care. It might be 1, 2, 3, and sometimes it's all 4. But the self-reflection the self-reflection piece first is, I need to realize where I'm holding the breakdown and what exactly happened. So am I in my itty bitty committee, or do I have data and facts that point that yes, this actually happened? Then what do I need from the other person? And am I willing to have that conversation? So here's how I'd like to rebuild trust. Is that person also willing? And then what do they need from me because I also contributed to that breakdown? So I take accountability, but I don't know what you need from me in order to rebuild trust. It takes that self-reflection first to understand where the breakdown happened for you. And then are you willing to have that conversation, knowing that depending on the severity of the trust breakdown, this may not be one conversation. It may be multiple in order to repair the relationship. And this is where reinforcing behaviors is really important, because a conversation isn't necessarily going to change everything. Actually, rarely does a conversation change things. But rather, Jennie, I see, we agreed that we would touch base once a week just for a check-in to make sure that we're on track together. I appreciate that you follow through and do that with me. That really matters to me because I feel like we're building trust again.
Yeah.
Or Craig, thanks for the accountability to let me know that you weren't going to deliver whatever by Friday. I appreciate that. I feel like that's really helping us build our trust back. So we want to reinforce the behaviors we want to see more of and let the person know that we see that they're trying. We're not expecting perfection or excellence out the gate when you're dealing with human relationship. Great question.
Yeah. And
Jennie?
it's two things there. Like, one is what do you need and what do they need? That reflection before the conversation, to put words around that, really helps the conversation, because you can check in with yourself. Is this realistic? Like, what am I asking for? Have I ever asked for it before? Like, that's another, you and I have often joked, you can't be angry about something that you've never ever sort of had as a clarity piece. And
That's
then I think the other part in there too is, it's okay, as you know, it's necessary to recognize, you're saying, recognize when somebody's trying, recognize up, recognize sideways, and recognize downwards, or reinforce, whichever one you're using there.
Yeah.
And we often forget that up piece. It's really easy to go sideways and downwards. It's not so easy to go up, but our leaders are humans too. Like, they absolutely are.
Ela, we're going to have you back. This has been a fantastic conversation. I looked at the clock when we started, it was 8:01, and all of a sudden it's 8:43. And I'm kind of thinking we need to start wrapping this up, because I know you have a big idea and a couple tactics to be able to share with us. And this is the point where and I thank you so much. Your wisdom in this area is, and your passion for it is infectious. So thank you for that. So over to the two of you to wrap us up.
Oh, no, I'll just click the button. Ela, go.
Oh, yeah. Jennie, I trust you to be the button clicker. Thank you so much for your support.
You got this.
So something to chew on is both trust and distrust is a choice. More trust is not always better. We want to be prudent and assess appropriately. And so to extend trust where we probably shouldn't, why would we do that? Too much trust exposes us to excessive risk. I grew up trusting very easily. It bit me in the backside very, very many times. That's part of my lived experience. So trusting too excessively exposes us to risk. And not enough trust really can make us blind or close us to opportunities, possibilities, whether that's, career-related ones or actually heartfelt and relationship ones. So I really encourage you to chew on those. Next one, please. So how are you intentionally designing trust? A conversation about trust starts to build trust. So even though you don't know what to say, even just saying, could we have a conversation about trust, will start to build. Identify specific trust building behaviors for your team. You can go through each of those 4 domains and pick one tiny behavior that helps you represent that particular competency. Reinforce when you see someone say or do a trust building behavior. I see that. I recognize that. I'm so glad that you did that. Here's why it matters to me. Reflect on your own behaviors and how they're impacting others, and then ask other people, I want to be a trustworthy person. Please give me feedback. Let me know what I should continue doing and what I need to tweak or edit. I love this one. I love this one. So this is part of the self-reflection. If there's one person in your life, whether it's someone you work with or someone you love or someone in between, what reasons does that person have to actually trust you? How are your behaviors impacting this other person? as well as what reasons might they have not to trust you. And sometimes it's our own behaviors again that are getting in the way. We just haven't paused long enough to think about it. And what would having stronger trust with this person mean for you, your group, your team, your organization? Whew. These ones are big questions. So I don't think I'm going to read through these if that's okay. But you share the slide deck afterwards, right?
We
Yeah.
do.
Or there, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and it'll
I
go out
think
in the podcast show notes as well.
these are really great conversation starters, but also reflection questions for you to consider relationship with trust. How do you want to build more trust? What does trust mean? And I really encourage you to stop and pause. It's something that is so critically important, and yet we really don't give it a lot of time and space.
Yeah.
So even 1% more time and space for considering your own trust and how you're building trust is fantastic. Next one.
We're done.
We're done. Jennie, any closing thoughts before we wrap?
No, I think those questions to Noodle, I really come back to what Ela said a couple of times now, is that 1%. You know, we often, when we hear things like this, we want to be perfect, be excellent, get it all right. And actually, if we were intentional 1% every single day, even within each domain or just one domain, we would build far quicker and far healthier in our relationship pieces. Yeah.
Well said.
Ela, thank you so much for joining us. Jennie, as always, appreciate you. Appreciate you both. And for everybody who joined us today, thank you. Have a great, hopefully not snowy long weekend. And we will see you all again next time. Take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Craig.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.